Hi, everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stretch Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 918 support tier list. So as always, if you enjoy this, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really does help out a lot on the channel. Come by, check out the stream sometime. Starts around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. We're on YouTube all the time now. So be sure to check that out. And check out the rest of the content as well. I just did release a patch notes video for 918, and I'm going to release a support 80 carry tier list and maybe a couple other tier lists as well. We have a ton of guides, coaching sessions, and lots of other content on the channel. So be sure to subscribe, check it all out. And we'll also have timestamps in the description if you don't have time to watch the whole thing. And I'll link this Google Doc to you in the description as well. Now on this Google Doc, if you click on this, you'll see recommended rooms, recommended items. If I do have an in-depth guide for the champion, then I'll have that linked as well. It has a link to the wiki, which we'll be referring to here, which has lots of good sort of statistical information about a champion. And it has a rating system that I came up with, just 1 through 5. 1 is the champion is one of the best or one of the worst at that role, at that task. 5 is the champion is one of the best at that task. So lane pressure, how well does the champion exert their will on the lane? How well do they sort of make the lane run the way they want it to run? Kill threat, how likely is the champion able to force kills in the laning phase? Safety is how safe is the champion, particularly from ganks. Scaling is how well does the champion perform over time, and reliability is how likely is it that someone's going to perform well in this champion over numerous games. So part of that is how difficult is the champion to play, both in terms of mechanics and in terms of decisions. And then also how many counter picks are there in the meta right now. So how often can you blind pick this champion and be successful? How often can you win despite unfavorable matchups? Okay, so let's go ahead and get in here. So as usual, Rakan's near the top. I've been a big cheerleader for Rakan. Anyone that's watched anything on the channel in the last 2 months knows that. I don't think anything's changed in that regard. I will say real quickly that, you know, there have been some tier lists that don't put him up as high, and some people think that, you know, maybe he's not as good in lower elo. I think that's really not the case. Like, there are a few things going for Rakan that I think often get underappreciated and overlooked by him. So the number one thing that people think about when they think of Rakan is they think, okay, amazing engage. Right? So that's his thing. He has his R, gives him a lot of speed. You know, he can flash in, he can W in, he can start fights really, really well. So everybody knows that about Rakan. That's why he's really good. But one thing people don't think about probably as much is how safe he is. So the fact that he can use this W, it's a free dash. You can jump over walls. You can move around the map with it. Gives you a lot of mobility, a lot of safety. And he has 2 extra dashes if he's close to somebody with this, so he can reposition with his E as well, even if his W is on cooldown. And the quickness gives you a lot of movement speed. So in an emergency situation, if you get caught out in the jungle and for some reason your W is on cooldown and people are trying to run you down, you can still use quickness and maybe get away. So that makes him really resilient to ganks a lot of the time. So even if your 80 carry is going to die bot lane, it's, you know, a 3v2 and there's no way you can turn the fight around, at least you can get out most of the time. And that's a huge deal, because if you're still there to help wave clear a little bit under tower, or just to show some presence to maybe delay people so they don't get tower plates or they don't get dragons, that can really be a big deal in mitigating the advantages they're going to get by camping bottom. Also, he's kind of challenging the tower dive, because he can shield people, you know, he can W to knock up, you know, he's got his ult to charm people. So he's just pretty resilient against ganks, pretty resilient against dives for the most part, and that's something that you really need in this meta, where people are going to be 4v, you know, 4-person camping bottom very often, with the roam or the mid lane roaming down and the jungle coming down a lot. I think it's very, very good if you can play a support that can deal really well with that situation. He's one of the best. Another thing is, not only does he have really good engage, but he can also get out after he engages. And that's something that even a lot of these other top tier champions we're going to talk about, like Leona and Nautilus, they can go in really easily, but they can't go out. And that's really important in solo queue, because sometimes your team just doesn't follow up. You know, you W in and just your 80 carry sits there and looks at you or whatever. You can probably still get out with your E. So you can actually use your engage for light trades if your ally doesn't want to follow up. So you can just W in, auto attack, Q them, and then E right back out. They're going to hit you a few times. You know, it's probably going to bust your passive shield, but you're going to get that heal when you come back out. So a lot of times you can still get pretty decent trades, even off of something that looks like an all-in. And that's really pretty unique to Rakan, because most all-in champions don't trade very well. It's just like all-in or nothing. So that's something that he does very well. And he surprisingly has quite a bit of effective health. So he's got 540. which doesn't seem like a ton, but you got to remember that he also heals off of his Gleaming Quill. Whenever he hits this, he's going to heal himself and his ally. You know, even in the early game, it's still going to be like 20 to 25 healing. That's pretty big, though. I mean, if he hits this, you think about a laning phase is like 3 minutes, right, where you have so much effective health. You know, if he hits this a few extra times, that could be 60 to 100, you know, HP that gets added to him. So it's like, now it's like he starts with 640. And then, if you think about this shield showing up, and you're going to be auto-attacking, you're going to be trading, you know, even every 30 seconds, which is very conservative, you know, over the course of 3 minutes, you're going to get 6 extra activations of the shield, and, you know, if it's averaging, including, like, the AP ratio and all that, if it's averaging, like, 6 or 60 shield, which is probably more than that, but even if it is, that's still 360 extra health, so you get 360 health off of this, and then you get an extra, you know, estimated something around 100, maybe off of a conservative Gleaming Quill estimate. Now, all of a sudden, you know, he's getting like 400 or 500 extra health. So in his first laning phase, it's really a lot closer to him getting, you know, like almost 1,000 effective health. When you think of someone like Leona, she doesn't have anything to heal herself. Nautilus doesn't have anything to heal himself in lane. Now, they can get some effective health off of their W and their, you know, their shield off of, like, light poking and things like that. But I'm just saying, he has a deceptively large amount of reliable, like, extra health that he gets off of this shielding and healing in the laning phase. And he can take Guardian, which is really important. So you don't have to stay in combat as much as some of these other ones. So you don't need the Aftershock, usually. So you can afford to go Guardian, which gives you even more effective health off of the shielding. And it also helps your ally out as well. So he's surprisingly pretty resilient in the laning phase compared to a lot of other engaged tanks. Now, his base stats are obviously lower. You know, Leona's going to have like 44 base armor. He's going to have like 32. But he deals with light trades really well, and that's something that a lot of people underestimate. I guess a fairly short cooldown on the ult. Another thing is that he scales. So that's something that virtually none of these engaged tanks do. They just don't scale at all. You know, they don't have a lot of items that are good with that. You know, they'll get like a Zeke's and a Knight's Vow or something, which is okay. But then personally, their abilities, they just don't really have ratios that you take advantage of most of the time, right? They don't have AP ratios most of the time, or you're at least not going to get AP on them very often. And a lot of times their armor ratios and their health ratios and things aren't really going to be that high. However, Rakan's are very, very high. So he scales with plus healing and shielding really well off of Battle Dance. And just the AP ratio on this alone is pretty huge. I mean, 2 procs of this is a 1.6 ratio with a 280 base shield. And it lasts for 3 seconds. Full value, no decay. So when you think about, like, Janna's shield starts decaying after, like, 1 second or something. Lulu's shield only lasts for 2.5 seconds. You can effectively have this last for up to almost 6 seconds. You can shield them once, then you can shield them again. You can split the shield among multiple people. So if you want to shield, you know, one person and go over and shield another person, you can even split up how that shield works. And 280 is amazing. Now, yes, you're not going to get full value out of this a lot of the time. Maybe you do if you wait on it to break and then you shield again for another break. But still, that number is massive. 280 with a 1.6? Like, Janna is supposed to be one of the premier shielders in the game. And she has a 210 base. And they may have buffed it to 220. I think it's still 210 base with a 0.7 ratio. This dude's got a 1.6. So he's actually, like, on the low, you know, that a lot of people don't realize, probably the best shielder in the game. Because it's a 280 base with a 1.6 ratio on a basic ability that has, like, a 12-second cooldown. And gives him 2 dashes. And he can split it between multiple people. It's crazy. This is so good. So if you find yourself taking something like Athene's Unholy Grail, which is becoming more popular on him, or sometimes even Ardent Censer, he can do that, and it can be great. And that's the final thing that I'll mention about him that a lot of people take for granted, is that he's so diverse when it comes to itemization and playstyle. You can take Zeke's on him, which is really nice, especially for an enchanter that has such an amazing shield. Being able to take Zeke's, have armor, have all this mobility, have this resilience that I was talking about against these assassins. You know, like the Zeds, the Talons, the Kianas, all of this stuff. They're going to have a hard time blowing you up compared to something like Janna or Sona. Yes, they can still do it, but you do potentially have answers with Zeke's. Then you can even go as far as Knight's Vow after that if you want to, or you can take Ninja Tabby if you want to. There are a lot of ways you can kind of mitigate that. And not only does he protect himself, but he protects his allies better than almost anybody against assassins, because you have the big shield and you have really good CC. So if you just press your quickness and then E over to your ally, then it shields them. It gives them the Guardian shield, in addition to your Battle Dance shield, in addition to healing them with Athenes if you have that, and it CCs them with quickness, and you can knock them up with W. And you can Q them to get an additional heal off of it. So they just have to go through a lot to kill somebody through Rakan. So he protects himself really well against assassins for an enchanter. It's like, yes, is he going to be easier to kill than like Leona as an assassin? Sure. But Leona doesn't have anything to help her ally out. Like, all she can do is try to CC them, but she doesn't have the Guardian, typically. She's not going to have the shield. She's not going to have the Q. She's not going to be able to itemize into Athenes. So that's the thing, is he protects himself and his allies from assassins really, really well. And that's something that is really important because most team comps right now run double assassin. So, yeah. And there's many, many more things about Rakan, but I don't want to talk about him forever because I talk about him every patch forever. But he's extremely good right now for all of those reasons. He's just so versatile. He's good against most matchups, no matter how far behind you are in a game. If you can just get the right engage, find the right picks, you can get back into the game. He does take some getting used to. You know, there are lots of different options you can do with him, and so that means that it takes a lot of learning to figure out when you should do stuff and to pull it off mechanically. But he's definitely worth it. There's a reason he has the last 2 world skins. I think if he's not the only champion, he's got to be one of the only champions outside of Zyra, of course, because their skins always come in bundles. But he's one of the only champs to have multiple world skins, I'm pretty sure. There might be a couple others, but certainly in the last 2 years, there's a reason this man has 2 worlds. I think every year he's been eligible, he's had a world skin, which means he's been one of the MVPs of worlds, because he's only been out for 2 years, and he's got 2 skins. He's 2 for 2. I mean, it's OP. So, yeah, he's really strong. I mean, even if we look at pro play, right? Look at pro play, he is easily the highest win rate, like most effective support. He's 61%, which is insanely high win rate for pro. I mean, that's almost one of the highest win rates, period, that has, like, multiple games on it. Why is he not showing up on that? I don't know. Anyway, so look at I don't know why his 61% was not showing up there, but either way, 61% after 83 games is pretty massive. Now, yes, Yumi, you know, she gets banned a lot more than he does, but she only has a 50% win rate, so I think it's just people just hate playing against her. Or maybe they only let her through if they have a good counter pick. But either way, statistically, really strong in pro, and then in solo queue as well, still pretty respectable. He's not obviously near the very top of the charts, but he's still like 51%, and for somebody that is as challenging to play as he is, that's pretty good. So, yeah, Rakan, gonna be amazing. Now, as far as like his items go, or his runes or whatever, I think Guardian is the way to go. I've tried Aftershock, maybe against like Leona or something in some of these like really heavy all-in lanes. Maybe Aftershock's a little bit better earlier, but Guardian scales way better because it has an AP ratio and it scales with plus healing and shielding. And the cooldown goes down a lot per level, and it helps protect your ally. So I think Guardian's probably the place to go. Demolish, you can also take Shield Bash if you want a little bit of extra resiliences in the laning phase, a little bit of extra damage on your engages. It's okay. Demolish does help you take plates better, so I kind of go back and forth on that one. I think that it just sort of depends on how often you think you're going to be able to get those Demolish procs. If you think you're going to dominate lane, you have a Draven on your team or something, you're against Ezreal, yeah, maybe take Demolish. However, if you're against like Leona, Draven yourself, and you have an Ezreal on your team, you might want to take Shield Bash or something else because you're probably not going to be touching that tower. So, kind of get a read on that. And then Bone Plating is what I would take most of the time. It's just fantastic against all-ins. It's a cooldown you can really play around to go for your trade. So I think that's really nice. You can go Second Wind if you want against heavy poke lanes maybe, but I still think Bone Plating is going to be good a lot of the time. And then Unflinching just gives you a ton of extra tenacity. It means that you can take mobility boots and still have tenacity, which is great. And because Rakan has so much mobility, if they can't lock you down, if they can't CC you, then you're probably going to get out of situations. So I think Unflinching is really good. And then secondary, there's a bunch of different options out there. I really like Presence of Mind, Tenacity, Legend Tenacity. Once again, Tenacity is going to make sure that you can move around. You're often going to have like 30 or 40 Tenacity with those 2 runes combined, even without getting Mercury Treads, which is going to be amazing, especially if they have a lot of really long CCs on their team. If they have stuff that's like 1.5 seconds or longer, then that's going to be really, really good. And then Presence of Mind is huge. for a couple reasons. Number one, it allows you to break the CDR cap. So you can have your normal 40% CDR that you'll get eventually on Rakan. But that gives you even more, like 10% per heal and assist. And that adds up a lot, especially in the end game where, you know, there are these big fights, team fights, and you're gonna kill like 3 opponents at a time. That's gonna give you 30% additional cooldown reduction on your ultimate. And every time that ults up, you can make a big play. So I think that's amazing. It allows you to roam around, more opportunities to make plays. So it's a very, very big deal. It's much more than just a normal 10% cooldown on your ult. It's, you know, even if you're just getting 1 kill off of your ult, that's 10% cooldown. But if you get multiples, then it can stack multiple times. So I think it's very, very strong. Other option would be like Nimbus Cloak plus something else. You know, I think a lot of people take Celerity. That does give you extra movement speed, which is nice, especially if you get mobility boots, which you usually will. And Nimbus Cloak does allow you to dodge stuff when you're running in and you're trying to dodge skill shots. When you're running people down, that can be really handy. So good for dodging things like Lux or Morgana or whatever. It is very helpful, but you already are pretty good at getting on people with your ult plus W. Most people in most situations are not going to be able to get away from that. And like there's a speed cap, so you get diminishing returns if you already have mobility boots and you're already really fast. If you're going over 400 move speed, you're not getting full value out of that rune. And it doesn't help you ult more. It just allows your ult to be potentially more effective. Now, one thing that's really nice with that, though, is whenever you ult in, then that can allow you to run around and potentially tag more people before you E back out. So basically, it gives you more effective ults, where there's a higher probability you can dodge CC, and there's a higher probability that you're going to be able to touch multiple people whenever you ult, but at the price of not having as many ults off of Presence of Mind. And Presence of Mind also refills your mana, which isn't always relevant, but could be if you're running low on mana at the start of a fight. You know, you've only got like 200 mana left, and then you know, R plus WN, you get a kill. That's really nice to help refresh your mana pool and allow you to do more abilities. So it's not always relevant, but sometimes it is. Anyways, I think the question just comes down to, do you want higher quality ults with Nimbus, or do you just want more ults off of Presence of Mind? Those are pretty much your two options. Sometimes people go for I don't even know, like maybe some kind of domination with Ultimate Hunter, maybe Taste of Blood Ultimate Hunter or something like that. But I think that, you know, just Presence of Mind is going to be just as good or better than Ulti Hunter a lot of times, because you don't have to stack it up. And the Tenacity Rune is going to be way better than Taste of Blood most of the time. But Ulti Hunter is tempting. It just takes a while to stack it up. But yeah, it can be pretty good. And then, you know, it just depends. A lot of the itemization depends a lot, you know. I like Nomads right now. It's just guaranteed gold, better wards, better vision of the enemy jungler, more move speed, more gold in the mid game so you can complete your second and third item faster. There's definitely an argument for Frostfang if you think you're going to be able to get kills in the laning phase. So I've seen pros do it either way, even in professional games. Sometimes I see Nomads. So it just kind of depends on the situation if you're going to be able to convert kills with Frostfang in the mid game. Mobility boots is what I get most of the time, unless they just have a ton of magic damage or physical damage, like they're just really stacked on one type of damage, and you need the extra resistances. Mobies are just so important. Allows you to ward better, rotate better, get more experience by getting back to lane faster. I mean, mobility is just where you want to be most of the time. Zeke's is where I'd start under most circumstances, unless you're against a very heavy AP mage bottom. If you're against like Zyra or Lux or something like that, maybe you can go Athene's, especially if they have an AP jungler like Eve. Athene's does give you pretty good magic resist, and helps protect against poke because you get Chalice. So Athene's is popular in certain circumstances, and it does scale really well later on with your healing and shielding, especially if you go Redemption after that. But Zeke's does give you that armor. It does give you the resilience, especially if you're against double AD bottom, like Pyke plus AD carry or Thresh plus AD carry. It's going to be really good. Or if they have an AD jungler to go with that, which a lot of junglers are AD, so they have a Jarvan and a Kha'Zix or whatever, you probably still want to start Zeke's most of the time. And then after that, it's kind of up to you. You can go Zeke's and then Athene's if you want, or if they have a lot of AD that's fed, like a Zed that's 5-0, you can go Knight's Vow. You can go Redemption for team fighting. You can go Shirelia's for like better engage. A lot of different options you can get out there. So you just kind of have to read it play by play. Check out the guide. I talk about it more in there. But let's go ahead and move on. Okay. I still spent 20 minutes on Rakan, but whatever. We're going to keep going. All right, Leona. I moved her up a lot. You know, that buff a few patches ago was actually really, really big. I thought that, I knew it was going to be good, and I did move her up, like, to tier 2. But I think it's a lot better than even people thought. This, where is it? It's like reduces, flat damage reduction here. This is so huge because I don't think there's a cap on that. Up to it is up to a maximum of 50% reduction. But this just applies to everything, and it adds up. Especially when you're against something like Zyra, who's becoming more popular. This just completely dumpster Zyra in an all-in. Because all of her plants are going to do basically half damage, because it's, you know, blocking the majority of their damage. So, like, those plants might be doing 30 damage at level 3, and she's going to be, like, blocking 16 of it. So, and I believe it's pre-mitigation damage. Okay, so it's not post-mitigation, which would be, like, you'd be literally taking, like, 0 damage. But it's still really good. So let's say that you have, like, 50 magic resist. They do, let's just say you have 100 magic resist, just for easy math. You have 100 magic resist. You know, like a Zyra plant's doing 30 damage to you, in theory, and you're level 3 Leona. First, it's going to block 15 of that damage, because it can block up to half. And then you're going to get an additional 50% reduction from the 50 magic, the 50 magic resist, or the 100 magic resist, rather, which is a lot early on, but it would be 25% reduction if it was 50 magic resist, which is very approachable. So that would take it down to like 7.5 damage. So now this ability that would do 30 is only doing 7.5 per plant. And this applies to auto attacks, getting reduced by a ton. It applies to like plant shots from Zyra, any kind of dot damage from stuff like Brand, any sort of rune damage like Comet or Airy, Scorch. All this stuff gets reduced basically by 50% whenever she has this up. So that means it's really, really difficult to kill her whenever she all ends with Eclipse. And they also reduced the time on her Q to, I think, a flat 5 seconds. So once you get like 20% CDR even, it's down to like 4 seconds. And they're going to be stunned for 1 second. So just think about how this works, right? Like you go in with your E, you stun them for 1 second, and then you ult them with Solar Flare. That's an additional 1.5 seconds. And that's 2.5 seconds. They're going to be stunned there while this is ticking, and it's at like 4 seconds. Then you're going to be able to stun them again after like 1 or 1.5 more seconds. So just the chain stuns are real. And then after all of that, then this is going to be back up again, because this is what you'll max second. And so it just feels like you just cannot, she's just like permanently stun locking you like over and over and over again, especially with the cooldown reductions to Q. So she's just really resilient to all ends, especially stuff that has dot damage, auto attacks, rune damage, all that kind of stuff. Even things like Misfortune ulting, like each little volley of her ult is going to get reduced by that set amount. What else? Each like Kaisa missile that hits you is going to get reduced by that amount. So if you look at, and that's a really popular one that comes up a ton. So if you look at Kaisa, right, and her missiles, physical damage. Okay, so if she has this like level 3 hitting you with these missiles, right, and you also have yours at level 3, 16, you know, flat reduction. That's a lot, because each one of these missiles is going to be doing that small little amount. Distributes, visible, each dealing physical damage to minions below such and such. Deals reduced damage. I don't know if it has maximum single target damage. Okay. But yeah, like it does the 30% reduced damage. Now, I'm not sure how that stacks. I think it would do 30% reduced to every missile beyond the first, right? So let's say she's level 3, right? And then like the first missile hits you, it's getting reduced by 16, bringing it down to like 60 or whatever. But then the next few missiles, right, when that's reduced by 30%, which is, I don't know, like 26, 25 damage, now it's hitting for 25 damage. And then it's getting reduced by 16 or whatever, or half of that down to 12. So it's basically, and then she's hitting you with all those missiles. It's basically reducing the damage on this, if that's how it stacks, which I think it is. It's 30% reduced first, and then it gets reduced by Eclipse, pre-mitigation damage, and then it gets reduced by armor, which you also get with this. So those Kaisa missiles are really only going to be hitting you for like 12 instead of 25. And when there's like 4 of them hitting you for that, that's saving like 50 damage. So off of this rune, you're probably reducing the total amount of damage off of this by something crazy, like 40%, or just something nutty. Like, there's just all these, like, weird little situations like that with Leona where stuff just does incremental damage like that, like Kaisa missiles, all that other stuff I mentioned. That just makes her very, very difficult to kill. So she's super resilient now with that. She has a ton of CC, and she actually puts up pretty decent damage early. It doesn't look like a lot, but if you get an auto attack reset, don't forget this resets your auto, so you get a free extra attack, right? So you're going to be doing like an extra 70 damage on top of, 10. So it's like 80 damage with a 0.3. So it's not like insane damage, but don't forget it also procs Sunlight, so at level 5, that's another 53. So now it's like 130 extra damage off of that. This doesn't look like it does a ton of damage. It's okay, but it's all about these Sunlight procs when you get those in there. If you're level 5 and you get 3 Sunlight procs on, that's an extra 150 damage. So it doesn't look like she does a ton of damage, but for some reason she just does, man. When you see it, like, you're just dead. You get blown up. A lot of it's because you get chain CC'd, and it does a deceptive amount of damage with the Sunlight procs. And a big thing with her is she has a super low cooldown ult with a very long range. So it's 90 range, or 90 cooldown on it. Remember that Rakan's is 130. So it's like almost 50% cooldown reduction from Rakan's to start with. Stuns for 1.5 seconds, does like some okay damage, and procs Sunlight. So it just allows you a lot of playmaking capabilities, and it's 1200 range. So if they don't have flash, especially if they're playing something like Jinx, or you just wait on like them to flash, or the Kaisa or something like that to use her mobility, and then you hit them with Solar Flare, you can make a lot of big time plays with her. So she's really resilient. She has a very low cooldown ult that is great for making plays. She does quite a respectable amount of burst damage. And she doesn't care about the position of the minions. Like, she can go through the minions with both her ult, her Zenith Blade, and then Shield of Daybreak is just an auto attack. But yeah, she can engage through minions with her E, with her ult. And just remember that 3 of these abilities are potentially AoE also. And there's no cooldown on the Sunlight procs. So not only, in a team fight, right? If you're like level 9 and this is a team fight, it's 80 damage per person, and it's hit by each Sunlight proc. So if you get in the middle with Eclipse, and you hit like 4 people with your Eclipse, they're going to be taking 320 damage. And then you E, maybe, and you tag 2 additional people, and then they take, 80 extra damage off of each one of those. That's another 160 damage. And maybe your Solar Flare hits like 3 people. That's an extra 180 damage. So her passive all of a sudden in a team fight is putting up like 600 to 700 damage just off of level 9 with like no items. So she's just really good in a lot of situations, particularly against a lot of these other champs out there that do this kind of like damage over time type of stuff. And she has pretty heavy like base stats. She's got 47 base armor, 576 health, and she gets a lot per level. Pretty good movement speed. So she's great. The only problem with Leona is she's very aggressive and she snowballs really well, but she has no back button. So she is all in. You go in with your Zenith Blade, you're in that fight. You are not escaping. She has no mobility like boost, no dashes, none of that. She's just staying in there, auto attacking, just trying to do as much damage as she can. So that's the problem, is if you go in, the jungler like all of a sudden flies out of a bush, or the enemy like teleports in, or just your ally decides not to go in with you, it's a huge problem. But she has one of the best engages, just because she has 2 different ways to do it on pretty low cooldowns with pretty long range. So I think she's very strong right now. She does have a bad matchup against like Thresh, just because he can flay back her engage with his E. But I think she's really good against Rakan specifically, and she's also pretty good against things like Pyke and like Nautilus. Just because she can kind of match them on CC, but she does more damage and has more resilience. Okay, so a lot of kill threat in the lane, especially if you have a high damage lane. Pretty low on the safety, doesn't scale very well, pretty low on the scaling, and then the reliability is about average. Then you just want to go Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Unflinching, and then now you can take this Presence of Mind, Legend of Tenacity build, which I really like a lot. I think a lot of people aren't doing that yet. But it's the same principle as Rakan. You're not going to be CC'd as much in the fight, which will allow you to reposition, will allow you to get off more of your stuns, and the Presence of Mind just allows you to get more ults in there. Just more ults, more kills. It's great. Especially helps out with her mana. Once again, if you're kind of running low on mana and you start a fight, then you get the 20% mana regen every time you get a kill or an assist. So I think that's super handy. So I'll just go mobility boots, Eye of the Aspect. It's always really good on any tank that can run it. It's a lot of flat HP, cooldown reduction, passive health regen for the laning phase, 4 wards, 4 ticks, gold generation, so you get even more gold. Just awesome. So typically you go mobility, max out Eye of the Aspect, Zeke's, and then Knight's Vow, Locket if you get to that point. Okay, so Leona very, very strong because she got some really significant buffs to her W and her Q recently, and a lot of the meta is changing around to be premium on hard engage. That's another thing I didn't mention with Rakan, but you'll notice, and we'll kind of transition over to the next person here. You'll notice a theme among a lot of these top picks is their hard engage. And the main reason for that is because you're just not seeing as much hard engage in other lanes as we've seen in the past. So it's really important that a support can do that. And a lot of the peeler tanks that have historically been good against hard engage, like your Tahm Kenches, your Brahms, even Alistar to a lesser extent, aren't going to be as good right now. Now, Janna is very good against them, and we'll talk about Janna here in a second. But a lot of the stuff that has countered them in the past is just not there as much anymore. And a lot of the popular picks in other lanes, some of them are these, like, engage champs. But a lot of them aren't. So, like, you know, your Vi and your Nunu have a pretty high pick rate. Let's just look at pick rate here. So what actually gets played in the jungle, not necessarily what's winning. Because I think that's more indicative of what your team's going to need a lot of the time. And I think this is a lot more of sort of what you see, right? You got Lee Sin, who can engage, but sometimes it's not, like, it's really nice if he has someone that can start the fight and then he follows up. So he has a higher probability of getting one of those good kicks in there. Jarvan, okay, Jarvan, great engage, really strong champion. But then we start getting into things like Kha'Zix, who I think is one of the most OP junglers right now. This thing is insane. Like, he does so much damage, so much burst. And so if you take something like Rakan or Leona, that's going to free up your jungler, if they're good on Kha'Zix, to take Kha'Zix to go in there and clean up while they're CC'd, because then they won't feel like they have to take some kind of CC champion in the jungle. So jungle has a lot of carry potential right now, I think. I know there are people that complain, oh, jungler's really weak right now. Maybe, but that's not what I see. Not when people are playing Kha'Zix. Things like that. Things like Kayn. I see those things snowball pretty hard quite often, especially Kha'Zix. But yeah, you'll see Kha'Zix is popular, Elise is popular, Kayn's popular, Sylas is still popular. You know, you're just going to see this kind of stuff a lot in the jungle. And these are champions that do not have really good engage a lot of the time. Gragas, sort of, but a lot of people build him as like AP, trying to blow people up these days. Evelyn, we talked about, if you watch the patch notes, a lot of people think she's super strong right now. Master Yi, always a menace at Platinum and lower. And then you start running into like the Hecarim's Device, the Nunus. But then we still have like Jax and Nocturne are pretty popular too. So I'd say you probably have at least half, if not 75% of these like very popular junglers just really don't have very reliable engage. And then if you look at top laners also, you don't see that much either, right? We have Darius, who's not that reliable. He's just kind of a lane bully, pretty good at team fights. Renekton, Jax, Aatrox, Pantheon, Fiora, Mordekaiser, you know, all of this stuff. Not very good at engaging. You know, we're not seeing the Malakais, the Ornns. You're seeing some Malphites in there, but we're just not seeing these kind of, like, really good engaged top laners. Like, a lot of it are just these, like, lane-dominant bullies, or split pushers, or both. So that means that having engage as support is really important, because at least half of the time your jungler is not going to have very good engage, and your top laner is not going to have good engage, and your mid laner is almost certainly not going to have good engage. It's very rare for mid laners to pick strong engage. Yeah, I mean, these guys, not only do they not have engage, they just don't have any CC, period. Most of the time, right? You got like Ahri, Yasuo's kind of conditional. Zed has 0 CC. Sylas, very limited CC. Katarina, 0. Kassadin, 0. Fizz, virtually 0. Akali, 0. Vlad, 0. You know? So there's just no CC outside of support. So they really want people to have someone who can engage, someone who has a lot of CC, and someone who's tanky that can take hits. Because as you noticed, a lot of these roles, there aren't champions that can even take hits. And so that's why it's really important to support to have those qualities right now for most of these top tier supports. And you're seeing that reflected in win rates, too. Look at win rates on these supports. You know, it's Nautilus and Leona are up near the top, and those are the two most popular, easiest to play of these champs. And if you start to see these get to over 53%, you know, they're really, really good, because usually they're floating around like 50 to somewhere between 50, 51%. So the fact they're up that high and they're this popular, you know, look at all the popular supports right now. Thresh, Pyke, Nautilus, Rakan, Leona. You need CC right now a lot of times. Now, Nami is one that's a little bit different, okay, and we'll pick it up here a little bit faster, but I just wanted to explain that as a caveat that, like, the tanks that engage, or Rakan, who's whatever he is, he engages the scaling engager. That's kind of where you want to be a lot of the time. Now, Nami is someone who is a little bit different, and I think that Nami is just I think she's the most versatile enchanter right now that you can play, because she does have some of the most CC for enchanters. She doesn't scale quite as heavily as something like Soraka or Sona, but she still does a pretty good job. So she's kind of a mix. Like, she has good CC with her Aqua Prison. It's a 1.5 second stun. It can hit multiple targets. And then, of course, she has Tidal Wave, which has really long ranges. You know, that can knock people up. She has her E, which can slow people down. So she's got a lot of CC, 2 different stuns, effectively, and a slow. And then she can speed people up, which is really good with these kind of meatball champions that are trying to run in there, just get on that back line with Surging Tides. And then she has, like, really, really good bully potential early. So she's like a bully that also has CC, and, like, scales with enchanter items. So that's kind of a weird position, but it works out really well for her in that she can level up one single ability, and that's her team fighting ability and her laning ability. And that's pretty rare. A lot of times, you know, a lot of those champions... Actually, the ones that are at the top right now do have the single ability level up. But historically, you know, you'll have some champs where you level one thing like 2 or 3 points in the laning phase, and then you switch it and do something else for team fighting. She's the same thing the whole way through. And it's one ability that both does your harassment and heals you. So it costs a lot of mana early, but it's very efficient because it serves both roles. And it makes it really difficult to try to trade with her. Because when she does that, you know, you auto-attack her, you hit her with an ability, she's hitting you, and she's healing herself on the same ability. And then later on, you know, this can bounce around and, you know, give Athene's healing to multiple targets, you know, per bounce. It can trigger Ardent Sensor on multiple targets per bounce. It triggers this speed up on multiple targets per bounce. So if you, like, hit an ally with this first in a team fight, it bounces to an enemy, and then it bounces back to another ally. You're going to get double heal, double speed up off of Surging Tides, double Ardent Sensor procs, and potentially, if you have a lot of charges on Athene's, double Athene's procs. So it's just really, really nice for team fighting later on. And then Tide's Blessing is really handy too, because when you get Ardent Sensor and you have Airy, you can put Tide Caller's Blessing on your AD carry. That will put a shield on him from Airy, which will trigger Ardent Sensor. And then you can use your W to go bounce around on your front line, and it'll give all of them Ardent Sensor too. Because with some champions, it can be kind of awkward where you need to actually heal your AD carry so that they get the Ardent buff, or shield your AD carry so they get the Ardent buff, but then you don't have the shield for your front line. So like Janna, for example, she needs to use her shield on her AD carry so that they get the Ardent buff and so they get the extra AD, so they do a lot of damage, but then you don't have your shield for your front line. So it's really like you're just buffing your AD carry rather than shielding them a lot of times. You know, that's what will happen in a lot of team fights. Or Lulu, for example, same deal. I guess Lulu's a little different because you can use your W on your AD carry, Whimsy, to also give them Airy, which will trigger Ardent Sensor. So Lulu's a little different, but I'm just saying that it's really easy to spread around Ardent Sensor to a lot of people with the way that her kit works, and that's something that a lot of people overlook. So I think she's good. She has great trading early, pretty decent scaling compared to a lot of supports out there. Pretty good disengage, you know, like against something like a Leona or a Nautilus. You can use this Tidal Wave, and you can use Aqua Prison to help out a lot with that. You know, the Tidal Wave, the distance on that is really nice for knocking, like, Jhin out of his ult, Xerath out of his ult, stopping, like, you know, teleports that are pretty far away. There's a lot of decent stuff there. Anything that tries to dash, you can't really dash through this. You have to blink over it. So she's just got a lot of like really nice utility. She can stop Janna really easily. You know, if you know Janna's about to ult, you can throw the tidal wave at her and it'll knock her out of her ult. So it's pretty good. And she's got a decent matchup against Janna because she can interrupt that ult with either tidal wave or bubble, which are pretty long range. And the final thing I'll mention is that range. She has very good range on all of her abilities. So for an enchanter. So her W, the heal, is 725 range. If you think about like a Soraka heal range, I think is 450. Sona's range to like touch people with the auras is like 450. Lulu's shield range is 600. So a lot of the enchanters are going to have to get much closer, which means they're going to get hit by collateral like AoE damage, or they're going to be putting themselves at risk of getting engaged on. So that's really handy. Janna's shield is further. Janna's shield is 800. That's really the only one where you can play like as far back as you can with Nami. And then, of course, Tide Callers is 800. Aqua Prison's 875. This is like 5 billion. On the Tidal Wave, it's 2750. So she can play really, really far back if you need to, so that you're not going to get hit by like the Ziggs Bomb, the Amumu ult, you know, just all the random crap that flies around in a lot of team fights. It's just a lot easier to position with her. So I think that makes her very versatile. And she's got nice movement speed, you know, at 335. Pretty good range at, you know, 550. Really good mana regen at 11.5. So she's just got some pretty good stuff. She's just a nice, well-rounded enchanter who doesn't fit the mold of exactly like really reliable hard engage, but she's good at disengaging and she's really good at managing fights. So I think she's really solid. And then you just want to go Airy, Mana Flow Ban, Absolute Focus, Scorch. I think Absolute Focus is really good because once again you heal yourself when you also damage them. So you're going to be topped off a lot of the time, or you're at least going to be over 70%. And then Bone Plating and Revitalize is probably where I'd be next. Bone Plating, you know, helps you out against all ends, and Revitalize is great if you're getting a lot of plus healing and shielding. Then just Mobility Boots. You know, if they have a super fed assassin, you can take like Ninja Tabby or something like that, but Mobility is probably where you want to be. Frost Fang, super easy to trigger it with her. And then just Athene's, Ardent, and Redemption is where I'd go. And then we have a guide there if you want to click on that. Now, some of these guides are a little bit older, but unless the champion's been reworked, the general gist of how to play the champion is going to be very similar from patch to patch, even if the itemization changes a little bit. So if you want to know the mechanics and like different tricks you can do with the champ, be sure to check out those guides. Okay, and I'm going to start updating those a lot more recently. I know I've got a stack of guides that I need to update, so be sure to check back in, and I should have some more guides coming out soon. Okay, we skipped Nautilus, didn't we? We totally skipped Nautilus. Okay, let me talk about Nautilus here real quick. Sorry about that. I'll keep the list here the same, but it's going to be in a weird order. I think I just got it. I don't know what happened. I zoned out. But yeah, I don't think we mentioned Nautilus. We went from Leona to Nami. So let's go ahead and talk about Nautilus here real quick. So sorry for being a little bit out of order. Nautilus has been rising up in the ranks quite a bit lately. Let me pull that over here. And there's a few reasons for that. He has had several buffs, but it's very reliable engage on his ult. It's 825 range, so it's not as far as like Leona, but it's 120 second cooldown, which is also longer than Leona, but it CCs for much longer. So if you look at this, even at level 6, it's going to CC for 2 full seconds, and they cannot dodge it. That's the biggest thing. If you're playing against something like a Vayne, Ezreal, you know, Kai'Sa, Lucian, there's all these mobile AD carries, they can't dodge it. They're getting hit by this. Unless they have Hourglass, they're getting hit. So they might be able to dash and flash away, but they're going to get hit by it, and as soon as they get hit by it, then you're going to hit them with the hook and pull them right back in. So, really, really good ult, and it hits multiple targets, so you always want to try to put this on the back line if you can reach them. Just ult their AD carry, even if there's someone disruptive on the front line, like there's a ribbon diving your front line or something like that, go ahead and ult the AD carry on the back line. The missile will go through, knock up the ribbon anyways, and then it'll still knock up the AD carry. So always try to hit the back line because the missile will still hit the front line as well. Whereas if you just ulted the ribbon, it wouldn't hit the Lucian on the back line. Okay? So they're dealt less damage, but they're also knocked up for 1 second and also stunned. Okay? And it does pretty good damage. So secondary magic damage is just this, so it's less damage, but the stun duration is the same on everybody. So it's really, really handy. And then your Dredge Line is the easiest hook to hit open field. It has a massive hitbox, really good range on it, pretty good speed. There's no delay, so it's just like instant. So if you're used to trying to hit people with like a Thresh hook or a Pyke hook, this is going to feel really, really fast for you and much easier to hit. Now, the drawback, of course, is you can't throw it over a wall or through a tower or anything like that because he can hook terrain. So that's a negative, but he can also get around the map. You know, you can rotate around the map faster by just like spamming dredge line. And you can escape. If you're getting ganked, you can dredge line a tower and potentially get out if you still have your dredge line available. So that makes him a little bit safer than someone like a Thresh or someone like a Leona. You can play a little bit more forward because you know you can dredge line out in a lot of situations. So that's pretty handy. His mitigation is a bit lower than a lot of other stuff out there, especially Leona. You know, the shield is pretty weak early on. It's 60 plus 9% of your maximum health. So, and I think people usually max this second, but in the laning phase, you know, like through level 6, you're only going to have 1 point in shield because you're going to max your Riptide first. And so it's only going to give you like maybe a 100 shield on a 12-second cooldown. So that's not going to mitigate a lot of damage. Now, you do have Aftershock to kind of help, but I would say he's one of the squishier hard engaged champions early on, and he doesn't have any way to heal himself or his allies either. So he doesn't have, like, Pyke is able to go invisible and heal up a lot of the harassment. Alistar can roar. You know, Rakan has his thing, you know, that he does with his shield and his Q. So, he, you know, he just really doesn't have anything like that. So he's going to be a lot more vulnerable to poke. But that's the weakest part of his kit, is definitely his Titan's Wrath is pretty weak. But his Q, like I said, is really good. Open field, it's easy to hit. His ultimate's amazing. It's probably the best ult of anyone up here, other than maybe Rakan, but it's really good. I mean, it's up there. And then Riptide is another thing that goes unnoticed a lot. This is what you want to max first, and it does like decent damage, you know, over time. If you look at total single target damage, you know, you could be doing up to 230 damage, right? And once this is maxed out, it can do up to 350 damage if you hit them with both waves. And it's AoE, it hits multiple people, and it does not get reduced damage to minions, so you can actually wave clear pretty quickly. Now, you might think, I'm a support, I don't need to wave clear, but the thing is, like, getting the minions really low helps your AD carry push a lot faster, so that you can rotate, get that scuttle, get that dragon back sooner, so that you get back, you know, maybe 5 seconds faster, so that you don't miss experience and gold. Like, it adds up over time quite a bit to have wave clear. And he has good wave clear with his Riptide, and then if you max W on Rakan, Rakan has pretty good wave clear with his W as well, although that's on a longer cooldown, so you need to be careful using Rakan's W to wave clear. You need to make sure it's safe. With Riptide, you can do that pretty much any time because it's on such a low cooldown. Is Rory getting you? But anyway, so you have 3 like pieces of hard CC with your dredge line, your ult, and then your passive is just, you just auto attack somebody and it CCs them for like 0.75 seconds or 1 second. So, and it's on target, so you can hit multiple targets with your staggering blow. So he's really strong right now. He has probably the most CC out of anybody that's very reliable, hard CC. You know, Leona, they can kind of dodge your ult sometimes. They can dodge your E. Like, it's really, really likely that he's going to hit you with depth charge. He's probably going to hit you with the hook, and this is just an auto attack to hit you with that. So it's basically like, it's almost like Leona's Q, not quite as long of a stun, but you can hit multiple targets with it in a fight. Doesn't cost anything, and probably does more damage, it looks like, than Leona. So he's really, really good right now. The only problem is he's just squishier than a lot of his contemporaries, but you just want to run Aftershock, Font of Life, Conditioning, Overgrowth. You can actually do, I'm going to change this up here, because I think that right now I would rather have, I forgot the tenacity thing. I'd probably rather have Bone Plating, Unflinching, that's what it is, Unflinching, and then Presence of Mind. I just really love that setup for runes, just more ults, more plays you can make. Then the tenacity, just make sure that you can't get CC chain locks, so you can still keep walking around doing stuff in fights. So I think that's really handy. Some people will go for the extra HP because he is vulnerable, and conditioning, but that just takes a long time to stack up, and I think the meta is just so fast. I just want as much power as possible in the laning phase. And then it's kind of your standard. You can go Tabby. He kind of needs a defensive boot just because his self-defense kind of sucks. But you can go Ninja Tabby if you're really... Or mobility boots if you're really far ahead. Then it's Equinox, Zeets, Night Vow, Locket. You can go Ardent on him if your AD carry is really fed or you have multiple people that benefit from Ardent because he does have AP ratios. He actually does that are decent. Like he's got a 0.9 on his Q. You know, this has a 0.6, which is like okay. His ult has a 0.8. So he does have some AP ratios. And then his E applies a slow to everybody AoE. So that means everyone's going to get the Font of Life debuff on him. And so they all get a lot of extra healing. And they can trigger Ardent Sensor whenever you do that. So that's something that's possible, especially if you have an AD carry that has Hurricane. And they all have Font of Life. I believe when each bolt hits a Font of Life person, it'll heal. So you get like triple healing off of Font. I think. I'd have to double check the mechanics on that. But I think that could be something that's potentially really good on him. So Font of Life is something that you don't take on a lot of people, but I think it's pretty good on him. You could also take Demolish if you want to. But anyways, yeah, he's going to be really strong right now. Got the last 10 minutes here. We'll talk about the rest. I think that Zyra is really good right now. The problem is against assassins, then she can just get obliterated in the mid game. So Zyra is almost always going to win lane. She's very oppressive. She has great ranges. If you include the range on her plants, you know, the Q itself is 800 range, but the plants I think are 550, the range plants. I could have sworn at one point they were 750. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. But 575 on the range plants plus, you know, the 800 here is almost 1400 range to be able to proc your Comet and your Scorch. So you can just always get that on people. Even if you just hit them with the Q and they only get one plant shot off, it's still really, really nice over time because it triggers, you know, the Scorch and Comet really well. And they did nerf the plant damage a while back, but like at level 3, it's still 30 base with a 0.15 ratio, and it has a 0.8 attack speed. So it's very common to get at least 2 plant autos off. And so that's going to be like maybe 60 to 70 damage additional on top of just your Q damage, which is going to be like 60. So it's pretty good poke, especially because you can proc it so consistently. You don't care about the minion wave. You don't need open field. You can throw your Q through the minions. You can throw your E through the minions. You can use your ult through the minions. So it gets through minions. It gets through Braum. It gets through like Yasuo Wind Wall. At least the melee plants do. So it gets around a lot of stuff that's traditionally pretty good against ranged champions. And she does a shocking amount of damage. Like, these numbers don't look very big. It's like, oh, man, it's like 60 to 200 damage or, excuse me, you know, 60 to 240. You know, level 6, it's only baseline 180 damage. And these numbers just don't seem like they're that high. But trust me, when you see it in effect, it's high. It's a lot of damage. And a big thing is, like, they do 2 per attack, so 100. They attack in a flurry, launching 2 shots per attack. So you basically do 150% damage, so 50% more damage whenever your plants are going off, and yeah, 50%. So it just does a ton of damage. If you spawn 2 plants on somebody and ult them and hit them with all of your spells, they're going to get deleted. So she's really, really good because of that, because it's so reliable, very reliable poke. I have had some people ask me, what about Electrocute or Dark Harvest in lane? I would say no to Electrocute because your trade patterns are typically like you try to poke them down with your Q first, and then you go for the all-in with the E. But the E is on such a long cooldown, it's on a 12-second cooldown, static, so it never goes down, that you just can't really go for the all-ins. Like, it's very, very risky. If you miss your E, they have 12 seconds to do whatever they want to you in the lane, and that's really, really dangerous. So you need to make sure that they're poked out low, so that even if you miss your E, they're going to be scared to go in on you because they're low health. So if you try to like hit them with your E and their max health, and you miss, and you're against something like a Pyke or Nautilus or Leona or just all of these other popular champions, they're coming at you. Like, they're going to flash engage on you probably, and you're going to die. So it's just really dangerous to go for that. And so that means a lot of times you're just not getting to use Electrocute that much. Like, sometimes, but not that often. Versus something like Comet, you can use very often. And each time your plant hits somebody, it lowers the cooldown on Comet, because it counts as a spell, like a dot hitting them, I think, is how they reclassified it. But either way, Comet's up a lot. You know, you're going to end up with like 50% cooldown on Comet with how often you're hitting them with spells and plants. So that's why it's really the best. And in team fights as well, there's just going to be Comets flying everywhere. Comet can hit multiple people. There's going to be a lot of plants out there attacking people. So, like, yes, electrocute straight up. If it's single target, you're trying to take them 100 to 0. You're hiding in a bush. You hit them with everything. Yeah, it's going to do more damage up front. But as far as, like, consistent damage over time and damage in team fights against multiple targets, you know, if you hit 4 Comets in a team fight versus 1 electrocute, the Comet's going to do way more damage. So that's why I think Comet is still sort of the standard on her. Also, just the runes in Sorcery are just better than the runes in Domination for her, I think, overall. For the most part. I think that the tree with, like, Zombie Ward and stuff is pretty bad right now, in general. Like, Ghost Poro's okay, I guess. But, yeah, I think that's still where you want to be. So I would just be going Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Scorch, and then Taste of Blood and Ulti Hunter are 2 that I like. This gives you a little bit of sustain and gives you more ults, more plays. Pretty good. You could also take potentially something like Boots plus Biscuits or Boots plus Cosmic Insight. You don't get any active items, so you lose some value on Cosmic Insight, but you could do it. But I think Boots plus Biscuits against a heavy poke lane could be okay. Although I think Taste of Blood, I've done the math on this in the past, I think it's similar amount of healing to Biscuits. You don't need the mana as much, typically. It's okay, but you don't need it as much. And then Ulti Hunter is really, really good because it allows you to make those extra plays. So that's what I would probably do. And then I would go Sorcerer Boots, Frostfang, Liandry's, Rylai's. Some people will go Mobility Boots on her. That does help you out with rotations and things like that. But, you know, losing your 18 spell pin is massive, massive. That's like basically, it's pretty close to 18% less damage on your abilities. So I in solo queue, I would definitely go for Liandry's. Another thing is all of those plant shots do proc Frostfangs as well. So your Frostfang's easy to proc and does a lot of extra damage. So she has great poke, great all-in, doesn't care about minion positioning, extremely good team fight capability. So she's great against these all-in champs. If they don't get her, if they go on somebody else, you can delete them. So like that Nautilus engages and hits your Volibear or something, and everyone goes into that fight, and then you just, like, Grasping Roots, you know, hit all your abilities, roll your hand across the keyboard, Strangle Thorns, you know, you'll just delete their team. So she's really, really good at counter-engaging if you have somebody that can take that first hit. If you have another tank on your team that can take that first hit, you can definitely delete people. But, you know, she has no mobility, no dashes, no defense whatsoever, so if they have a Fed Zed, Fed Talon, Kiana, Kayn, you know, any number of these, like, high mobility assassins, you're going to be in really, really big trouble. So that's why I've kind of gone away from her lately, but I do think she has a ton of potential if they don't have that. If we start to see more tanks come back into the meta, if we see more people playing stuff, you know, if we look at the tanks, and this is changing slowly, but still not a ton. But in terms of win rate, you know, we're seeing Nunu, Volibear, Mundo and Vi are the highest win rates right now, although they're not the most popularly played. If you see these, you're really, really good against these a lot of times as Zyra, because you take Liandry's, which has maximum percentage health, and they're not going to be able to get on you. So that means that you're going to be able to put out a lot of damage in fights. So if you have these on your team to take those hits, or if the enemy team has these and they can't really engage on you reliably, I guess Vi can, but then that's a really good situation. So stay tuned. Zyra might go up a little bit more if they buff tanks a bit more on the next patch. We'll see. But basically, lane dominant, strong champion. Be careful around assassins. Also, one final thing I'll mention. This is why I have Zyra up here instead of Brand. I get asked this a ton. Why do I like Zyra so much more than Brand? Big thing is vision. These plants later on are basically a free ward that you get every 12 seconds if you max this second, which is what I recommend. Not including your CDR that you can get. She doesn't get that much CDR though, but it's a free ward. So you can spawn this in bushes, and that helps protect you, right? And it gets around control wards. Remember that your plant still sees the full vision, even if there's a control ward in the bush. And she has 575 attack range. That's another thing that's really important that a lot of people forget about. So it's really easy for her to sneak in some extra autos in the lane, but it's also really easy for her to kill wards at a safe distance when she has this plant watching her back. She can clear out those control wards. And a lot of times what happens is you'll have to walk your wards forward with other supports. You know, you don't know an area, you use something to check a bush, some kind of skill shot, and then you have to walk up, ward the bush, and then if that looks safe, then you have to walk forward again, you know, and sort of walk your wards forward. But with Zyra, you can use these plants to check stuff, and then you don't have to waste a ward on it. And then you can just slowly move forward and put your wards where you need to put them. So it just allows you to have much more effective ward positioning because you don't have to walk them forward, and it allows you to be a lot safer in those types of situations. So that's something Brand doesn't do. He doesn't give any extra stuff to Vision. And Brand requires a wide open, like, he can't fire his fireball through minions, so you can't get your stun unless you walk around the edge of the minions, which is going to expose you to hooks and other skill shots from the enemy. So if you're against something like a Nautilus, for example, bot lane, Zyra can harass and hide behind the minions, no problem. But if you're Brand and you're trying to go for real harassment where you can hit your Q, get that stun, and then land your 3-hit combo on him, you're going to have to put yourself at risk of getting Nautilus hooked. So I just think that she's a little bit safer, controls Vision better, and puts up a very similar amount of damage in fights. So I just think Zyra's better in virtually every situation. But Brand, if you have like if they have a ton of melee champions on their team and they're all stacking up for team fights, he's probably going to put out more damage overall. But I still prefer Zyra. Okay, we'll go for a little bit longer just so I can talk through some of these. Okay, Pyke, but we'll go through these a little bit faster. Pyke is okay. Like, he's very snowbally. If he gets ahead, he does a ton of extra damage. You know, with his ult, the execute is huge. And he gets a lot of extra gold. That's the big thing. As you start getting a couple of kills on Pyke, you're going to have thousands of gold more than the support really quickly, than the enemy support. And so that means you can start buying things like Ghost Blade, Dust Blade, and that's going to allow you to snowball and get even more kills. So Pyke is like the sort of quintessential 1v9 support. And he's fairly safe for just how dangerous he is, right? Like, he can throw his hook, but it's on a low cooldown. If you miss the hook, no big deal. Usually you can just run away. And it's on a lower cooldown than other hooks. So, like, early game, it's a 12-second cooldown. I think Thresh's is like 20. Rakan's W is close to 20. Nautilus is probably pretty close to 20. Like, they all start off with a much higher cooldown. And it's cheap. Like, Blitzcrank hook is like 100 man, I think, at level 1. So 70 is pretty cheap. Does decent damage. I mean, 275 at max rank with a 0.6 is pretty good. And it pulls them close to you and slows them for a little bit. So it's a pretty nice hook overall. It does require a bit of wind up, but it is pretty fast. Once you actually throw it, it's fast compared to some of the other hooks out there. But it does take a second to wind up, so you want to try to get vision control of the bushes so you can get, you know, more reliable hits. But then he also is invisible. Almost all invisible champions are going to be powerful because they can get around wards. People just don't respect it until it's too late. So he's like one of the kings of rotations. You know, especially once you get mobility boots and ghost water dive, you can just run up and down that river. You know, rotate to middle, rotate into the enemy jungle, get deep wards, tag team with your jungle and invade. There's just a lot of stuff you can do with him once you get pressure on the map. And, you know, this scales not only, I guess it doesn't scale with AD, but the speed does scale with lethality. So when you start getting more lethality, you get, like, whatever it is, 20% lethality off of Ghost Blade, then all of a sudden, you know, this is 90% bonus movement speed. When you get this leveled up, in addition to, you know, everything else. Or even if you don't level it up that much, like you only go for 40, it would still be 70% extra movement speed. So I think that that's really, really strong. Obviously allows you to roam around the map, get around wards. He also gets Dust Blade, which allows you to see wards and kill them. So it's like getting a free extra sweeper. Then you have Phantom Undertow. It's okay. I mean, it allows you to dash and get away from stuff, which is really handy. It also has that stun component to it, so kind of like Rakan, he's one of the only mainstream supports that has a free dash where you don't have to click on anything or anyone. You can just do it anytime, anywhere, over a wall. So he has, like, super speed, invisibility, and the ability to dash. So it's just virtually impossible to kill this guy if it's a smart Pyke player. And then, of course, he has his signature ult. Can execute people. I mean, this is huge. It's 80% of your bonus AD plus 1.5 per lethality. and it starts at 250. So, like, a lot of enchanters are going to be at, like, at level 6. They're going to be somewhere around, like, 700 to 800 health. So this is going to do, like, over a third of their health as an execute. Why is an execute important? Because shields don't matter. Like, you can have a 10,000 shield on you and be at 30% health as Janna, and he will still kill you with the execute. So that's why executes are so dangerous. It's because it's even more dangerous than true damage, because it gets through shields. Now, invulnerability will still stop it, like a Taric or a Kayle ult or something like that. But any sort of shield, any sort of other damage reduction type of mechanics, anything like if they have Aftershock going on them, you know, Leona could have her W ticking with Aftershock, just getting like 200 extra armor and magic resist. And if she's at that 30% threshold, she's still dead. Doesn't matter what their resistances are, doesn't matter about their shields. It's just straight up, what's their health at? Okay, they're dead. So yeah, once you just get a couple of items with this, you know, you get your Ghost Blade or your Dust Blade or whatever, a lot of that AD is coming over and a lot of the lethality is coming over. So this number gets pretty big pretty quickly. Then they changed the Your Cut to where he gets double gold, pretty much. If he gets a kill, or he gets 1.5. So if he gets a kill, then he gets a Your Cut, which is basically like an assist on top of it. And if he gets an assist, he gets 2 Your Cuts. So he gets a hell of a lot of gold. He basically gets anywhere from 50% to double the gold that he would get. And he gets the assist. So if you get the assist on somebody, so if you do Your Cut and you almost kill him and then somebody else kills him within like 1 second or whatever it is, or you're like in the motion of killing them and someone else kills him, you get an assist plus 2 Your Cuts. So that's basically a kill and a half. Versus if you actually kill him, then you also get, you know, pretty close to a kill and a half. So it just gives him a ton of extra guaranteed gold. So a lot of damage, pretty resilient in the laning phase because he heals up a ton. He basically heals back to full pretty much whenever he goes invisible. At least that's what it seems like. Really good ult, or really good Q, great rotations, great mobility, excellent ult for killing people. So he's fantastic. I mean, he definitely could be tier 1. The only reason that I have him down at tier 2 is he is squishy, so if he does fall behind and someone does CC him, he's going to die. If they do get a hold of him, you know, Nautilus or Leona locks him up, or Rakan or whatever. And his items are very expensive, so if you're not getting the kills from death from below, then it's going to be really hard to afford your Ghost Blade, your Dust Blade, all that, and he just doesn't have a lot of utility. You know, when the enemy's chasing you, and you're trying, like, all you have to try to stop them is Bone Skewer, you know, you're just pulling them closer a lot of times to your AD carry, unless you position in sort of a funky way to pull them away, where you're putting yourself at very high risk to do that. Or you can maybe try to use Phantom Undertow to stun him, but it's just like, it's so conditional, and it's so hard to peel or stop the enemy from diving and murdering your AD carry. So, really good, like, S++ on offense, but kind of middling on defense, just because he's squishy and all of his stuff is conditional. So, he can be really good. He's very risky, but he's super high reward if it works. So just Aftershock, that does help out a little bit with the squishiness, and then just Demolish, Bone Plating, Unflinching, and then Presence of Mind, Legend, Tenacity. And then you just want to go Targon. Some people go Coin. I think having that extra healing is really nice, and I also think that it does heal your ally as well a little bit, and it gives you AD. So the flat health converts over to AD, so that makes it easier for you to execute people. So I like Targons. You can go Coin if you want to. Then Dustblade, Ghostblade, and Edge of Night would be where I would go. So very good, high risk, high reward champion. I just have him a little bit lower because, you know, if you fall behind, it is rough. His win rate is a little bit lower than some of the other ones. I know Rakan's is as well. But yeah, he's kind of around, he's a little bit higher than Rakan. He's like, what, 0.3 higher? But they're both pretty hard to play. They require a lot of practice, so... Anyways, still can be good. Okay, Thresh is another one, and I almost felt like putting Thresh in tier 1, but it's just hard to do it because he doesn't really scale, but he is very, very good right now, and a lot of it is because he's he's one of the only champions that's a blend of really good offense and really good defense. And he has so much utility to his kit. So specifically, he's very good against Leona, and she's really popular right now because he can use his Flay to knock back her engage with her E. And and then he can hook her after that and just kind of chain CC her and just allow people to blow her up. So he has a really good interactions with her. And then his hook, of course, if you actually land the hooks, it's one of the lowest cooldown hooks because it's a flat 3% after 40% CDR. So once you get your 40% CDR, your hook's going to go down to like, I don't know, 8 seconds or something normally. But if you hit it, it's going to go down to 5 seconds. So it's just going to feel like your hook is up all the time whenever you're playing Thresh, if you're hitting hooks late game. So that's really, really cool. Feels really rewarding. Decent damage later on. You don't get AP on him, but 240 flat's okay. And his hook is nice because it's just sort of like you don't have to go in on it, right? You can just hook somebody and it's just a CC for 1.5 seconds. If you want that to be what it is, that's fine. You don't have to go in. But you can go in if you want to. And when you go in, you know, you can flay, knock them back into you. You can put the box on them. You can throw a lantern to let your allies run in with you. So this is super handy, and it, like, especially at higher elos, but this can still work at lower elos sometimes, is it can allow someone to follow you on the hook, especially over walls. So if you hook somebody over a wall, drop a lantern on your ally, and then take that hook, they can take the lantern and come over the wall with you. Whereas, like, if you go over a wall with Leona, your teammate may not be able to come over in time to help you make a play. So it's really nice with that. He's obviously great with gank assist when someone comes in, because you not only have like a few different forms of CC with your death sentence, your flay, your box, but you can also throw the lantern so that your jungler can gank through the lane and come back through. Now, one thing that's important also is when you start taking your hook, if your lantern's already on the ground, they can actually take, if they start to take it, then they can take a really, really long lantern that's much longer than it appears. So because you can throw it on the ground, but then it has a longer leash range. It's 1500 leash. So you can throw it on the ground for 950, and then once you start taking that hook, you know, for an additional however long, 1100, up to 1100, then they can click on that and eventually, like, basically be able to flash in for like up to 1500 range. So it's just really, really good potential that he can do at these things. So he can you know, stop engages with flay. He's really good against Rakan too, if you time that correctly, because when Rakan comes in with his W, if he doesn't have his ult going, you can flay, and even if he's already under you and he's about to jump up, if you hit him with that flay, that knocks him out of that jump. So even if he starts the animation with his W, you're still going to be able to knock him out of it with the E, which is super frustrating as a Rakan player, trust me. But that's how the interaction works. It's really good. So you basically have a full like 1 to 1.5 seconds to flay that Rakan back, so you have a lot of time on that. You can also stop other people from moving away. So if like you know, Rakan once again is trying to E over to get out of a fight, maybe he goes in with W, you don't flay him on the W, but then he's trying to E back out. When he does that E, you can flay and pull him back in. Or like Yumi, she's trying to be annoying, right? She's trying to come up and auto attack you. If you flay her when she tries to jump back to her ally, then she's going to get knocked out of that movement, and her jump is going to be on cooldown. Or like if Tristana is trying to jump away, you can actually flay and pull her back in. So there's a lot of like really intricate stuff you can do with flay. It's one of the hardest skill shots in the game because there's so much potential to stop movement, but it's just really weird. It's very quick. It has a strange hitbox. Usually you want to aim it behind you so that you're pulling them towards you, which takes a lot of practice, because if you get your mouse at all in the wrong direction, just like by a little quarter of an inch, then it could go in the wrong direction and you miss your flay. So it's a really awkward, really challenging skill shot, but if you get used to it, very strong, has a ton of potential. The box is on a long cooldown. It really doesn't do that much damage. It does provide a slow. It's okay. It's one of the weaker ults of these engaged champions. So that's kind of one of his weak points, that it's a long cooldown and not as effective as the other ones. It's a really short radius. It's okay. It still does damage. It can help you peel. But the main reason that you're playing him are his 3 core abilities, which are awesome. Because you can use them, all of them, offensively or defensively. You can peel with hook. You can engage with hook. You can, you know, save allies with lantern. You can pull in your allies on engages. You can flay forward. You can flay backwards to stop stuff. Like, he just has so much potential there. But he starts off with really low base armor, 28. Now, when he gets his souls late game, he can get some decent base armor. So that can be okay. But his baseline numbers are low. His health is pretty good, but the armor and the magic resist are super, super low. The magic resist, he never gets any extra off of it, I believe. His souls don't give magic resist, it's just armor. Yeah, so he's always very susceptible to magic, which is why he's kind of weak to things like Zyra. But the armor aspect, you can kind of start catching up, although remember, he doesn't get armor per level, and most tanks will get 3 armor per level or something close to that. And so that means that you really, like, every level, you need to be getting, like, at least 4 souls to keep up with them. So it's like, sometimes you can do that, but sometimes not. So, like, really late game, he might be able to catch up with the souls if you're on point, but early game, he's almost always going to be a lot squishier. And he doesn't have any healing. So, unlike Pyke, unlike some of these other ones, Alistar, Rakan, he has no healing. So, once again, and he has low magic resist. He's really, really vulnerable to poke. Okay. But just your items, you just go Aftershock, Demolish, Bone Plating, Revitalize. I like Revitalize. You know, there could be an argument, I guess, for... let me put this in Georgia text also. There could be an argument for getting Unflinching and maybe Presence of Mind, although his ult's not that good. Revitalize, a lot of times he does take Redemption second. So sometimes he'll go Zeke's, then Redemption, just because items are so bad on him anyways, you might as well take that. And he does have a shield with his W, which is what I recommend you max second. It's a decent shield. I mean, a 220 plus 1 per soul. If you have like 50 souls, it's a 270 shield, so it's okay. So a lot of people do go Redemption, which Revitalize is pretty good with that. After that, I mean, I might actually go something like Taste of Blood, Relentless Hunter. Because I don't like getting the boots on him. I've tried it out, especially after the nerf to the boots, because then you just can't get your mobility boots as fast because you're waiting on the free boots at 12 minutes. But Relentless Hunter would give you even more movement speed, out of combat movement speed, in addition to what you get from Mobies. And Taste of Blood gives you a little bit of sustain in the lane. So that's probably what I would do. And then just mobility boots, Nomad, Zeke's, Val, Locket. I'm going to say Redemption. I think most people are going Redemption on him. Let me see here real quick. I know we're basically way over time, so I need to cut the time here in a second. So sort of the average people are going for Biscuits, Cosmic. I mean, I guess top-end players are probably going to go for, like, Hex Flash. No, they do like Boots, Cosmic. I don't know. Try it out and see what you think. So people are still doing the Redemption fairly frequently. It's usually like Zeke's Redemption. But it seems like a lot of people really do like Inspiration still. Mad Life, the legend himself. Yeah, he does Stopwatch. Either Stopwatch or Hex Flash, I imagine a lot of people probably do. Yeah, Stopwatch Biscuit. Maybe Stopwatch Biscuit for, like, unless you're, like, Challenger or something, I probably wouldn't go Stopwatch because it just does not get used properly by most people. So I think mine with Relentless is just better for kind of average elo, but I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe, I mean, I guess Cosmic is good because you are getting Redemption, and so it does lower the cooldown on Redemption, so... Fine. I'll tell you what, we'll say Biscuit Cosmic since so many people are doing it, and that does give you sustain. You do have the cooldown reduction on your Redemption with Cosmic, so I guess we'll go with that. Okay, last couple of champions here. Janna's been moving up quite a bit lately. She's really good at peeling. You know, you have to have a good 80 carry to make her work. Because, like, you know, using your shield on your Azir or your Zoe or whatever is not going to do anything because it gives extra AD. But if you have someone who's really fed that uses AD, this can be assassins too. So this can be Zed, Kiana, Talon, that type of stuff. It's still really good on them. But that's one of the big things people underestimate about her. She gives a ton of extra AD. She has a pretty big shield at 220 with a 0.7 ratio on a 12-second cooldown. Not as big as Rakan's, but she does have good range on it. She has 800 range, so she can stay really far back. Her ult is just really good at resetting team fights. Someone tries to engage, you just say no, press ult, blows everybody back, heals everybody for a ton. And then she can stop movement too, so it's kind of like Thresh in a sense where, like, Howling Gale, you have to be able to use that very quickly and efficiently to stop stuff, but you can do all the things I just talked about with Flay, right? You can knock, like, people out of movement, like if Tristana's trying to run away, or Leona's trying to engage on top of you, or Jarvan, or just anyone's trying to jump on you, or your AD carry, you can use the Howling Wind to help you out with that. And she has pretty decent poke early. If you can spam your W on a melee champ, it can be pretty good. Now, the problem with that is this is really close range. It says 550. It's got this weird, like, edge range. So, it's, like, further than that. I don't know why they do this, but it's really probably, like, 600 range, effectively. So, pretty decent harassment there. They did nerf the amount of damage that it does by a ton. I think it used to do, actually, like, 280. So, they nerfed it down to, like, 195. And then she just scales super well. You know, you get AP, you get your plus healing and shielding. You have 2 abilities that have really big plus healing and shielding, and then when you get AP, it also translates over into extra AD that you can put on your ally. So she's just really good with like Ardent Censor, Athene's Unholy Grail, Redemption, the usual suspects. So if you think you can get away with not getting engaged on, if you're playing against something like a Rakan, a Nautilus, Leona, stuff like that, then she can be pretty good. Now she is going to be squishy into a lot of those champions. You probably do need Aerie on her, although there have been people taking comment for more oppressive sort of laning phase stuff. And in theory, you know, you might be able to take Guardian or maybe even Aftershock on her if you're against some like really hardcore engage champs or like really high damage like Zed or something like that, really high damage champs. So a lot of people are going for kind of this sorcery with Celerity and Relentless Hunter build. So that's pretty good. It gives you a lot of movement speed. See if there are any pros playing her with like weird... so Mickey's trying out with whatever, with Aftershock. But a lot of people are doing kind of the Taste of Blood, Relentless Hunter, and then they're either going Comet or Aerie. Aerie obviously scales way better. Like, that's actually a pretty nice shield later on. The extra shield that you get is going to be, like, baseline 60 and then a 0.25 ratio and scales with plus healing and shielding. So Aerie, I still think, is really good later, although, you know, if it's a super oppressive lane, Comet will do more damage early on. So it's kind of up in the air. But yeah, really good scaling, really good disengage. You just have to have a lot of faith that the rest of your team is going to be able to make a play. So if you have something like a Hecarim on your team, a Vi, you know, this other stuff that can start fights, she's great. But sometimes if you just have a bunch of assassins sitting around and you're behind, you're just going to be sitting there, like, basically watching your team lose for the next 15 minutes. So she just does not have the ability to make plays. But if you do have playmakers, if you do have strength on your team, then she can certainly... protect them and make them even stronger. So if you're duoed with a really good AD carry like a Jinx or something like that that scales really well, then yeah, she can be great. Okay, Bard is another weird one that I'll mention here just really quickly. He has had a higher win rate as of late. He's gone down a little bit, but he just puts up a lot of pressure early. He's kind of funky. He does have some healing with his W in the laning phase. He's really short range. I think his auto attack range is like 500. Which is going to make him like really vulnerable to hooks or all-ins from a lot of champions. Yeah, 500 auto attack range. So that's kind of rough. He can stun people with his Q, which is pretty nice. Or I guess I think it's a bind. No, it is actually a stun with the Q, which is pretty good. You know, up to almost a 2-second stun. You do get to roam around the map. He is really fast. He does scale up with these chimes where you can, you know, eventually get like AoE slows. You do a bit more damage. So he puts out more damage than you would think if he's using those chimes correctly. And he gets a lot of mana off of collecting those, which allows him to spam more Cosmic Bindings, more Caretaker Shrines. So he's pretty good, and he's great at like roaming around and making plays with your jungler. So if you have like a duo that's a jungler and you just run around, you get mobility boots, and you do this magical journey and just like keep showing up in random places with your jungler, then you can make some pretty big plays, especially if you are on blue side bot lane. So if you start off on the bottom side of the map, and then you wrap around to the top side, like to the top side jungler to that try, and then you come through with the jungler. You come through that wall that's like really thick there. You can catch a lot of people off guard. You can do it on the other side as well, although it's not as good. But yeah, you know, just kind of really pesky champion, has a lot of potential there. Tempered Fate has a ton of different things you can do. You can stop them from channeling certain things or doing abilities. You can use it offensively. You can use it defensively. So, like, you could use it on a Janna who's about to ult, or you could bait a flash out from somebody and then tempered fate them after that. It's 3,400 range, so it's really far range. You can protect your own team from things like a Karthus ult or somebody's about to die to ignite. You could tempered fate them, or like they got Zed ulted, you could tempered fate them. You're tower diving, you can tempered fate the tower. You're trying to like make a play on Baron or something, you can tempered fate the Baron and then kill the jungler before they have a chance to smite it. Like, there's just almost an infinite number of like weird things you can do with tempered fate to make plays. So you really need to play Bard a lot to get the hang of all these different situations, especially where you can use that ult. But once you get the geometry correct and you're consistently getting stuns, you're consistently making good decisions about roaming, and you're consistently making good plays with your ult, then he can be like really, really good. And he's almost never picked, never banned. So he's a great one-trick type of champion. But for most people, I probably wouldn't recommend him if you're trying to climb. But if you want to have some fun and learn something different, I think he can be really good. So yeah, I'd probably just go Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Zombie Ward, Ingenious Hunter, and then his Taste of Blood, Relentless Hunter. I just like the Georgia font for some reason. It just looks cooler. So that's good. And then just Mobility Boots, Eye of the Watcher, and then just Redemption. And his itemization's not that great. Sometimes he goes Twin Shadows to slow people down, so you can hit your Tempered Fate on him easier from like long distance. So that can be pretty good. Redemption's okay. Athene's is okay on him. What are top end people playing? He's kind of like Thresh, where there's just not really good items for him. But he can be okay. Looks like, yeah, Redemption is very popular. Twin's pretty good. Athene's is pretty good. So I guess most people are going Athene's and Redemption. You do have a heal with your W, so that's good. You do get a lot of extra AP off of Athene's. The plus healing and shielding does work pretty well with some of your kit. So I guess that's what I would just go is Redemption then Athene's. Or if you go Athene's early, that does give you some extra magic resist, extra healing, extra AP. So I might even start Athene's first and then go Redemption after that. But just depends on what you want to do. So yeah, Bard can be pretty good, but somewhat situational, requires a lot of practice. And finally, Sona. People are really familiar with her. She does have really good scaling still. I mean, they didn't nerf like her healing at all. They just nerfed sort of the damage on her Q. I still play her from time to time. If they don't have assassins, and if they are playing another enchanter, and you just want to try to outscale, then you can play Sona. So if they pick like Ezreal Janna or something like that, and they just have like, I don't know, Volibear as a jungler, and they just want to scale, and you have something like a Jinx on your team, you have like Jinx plus I don't know, Rise or Cassiopeia plus something else. You just have like a team fighting scaling comp, and you're pretty confident that they're not going to be able to assassinate you. Then Sona can be really, really good. I mean, she's just inevitable. Once she gets like 3 items, she wins every team fight. It's almost impossible to beat her. Just because if she gets 2 Ws off, it's over. It's like thousands of effective healing and shielding. So yeah, she's very good. Also, she has a nice AoE ult. So if you have like a team comp that locks people down, like you've got an Amumu with her, or Jarvan, Sejuani, just something that's going to be able to stick people and hold them all together, and you can chain your ult with that, then that's going to be really strong. So anyways, a couple of honorable mentions here kind of in the tier 3 that I'll talk about. Yuumi is still, like, she can be really oppressive if you're good on her, but she's been nerfed so many times. I just can't recommend her for solo queue people. Like, she does have the potential to be really strong, but she's still clocking in at, like, 44% win rate. You have to hit all of your Qs, like every single Q. It's a very big deal, and that requires positioning with your AD carry and for them not to hide behind minions. But if you consistently do hit all of your Qs, I think she's a lot of fun to play, but and she does provide some really good poke, but she can't really roam. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is a lot of times you don't want boots on her, or if you do get them, then you usually get Ionian boots, and so she's slower on the roam. If you get caught out, you're going to die. But you do have really good disengage with your ult. The problem is, you know, sometimes she has problems against hard engage, particularly things like Leona and Nautilus, Pyke. Is you don't have a lot of, like, you can use your ult to peel, and you do have some burst healing, but at the end of the day, it's just tough, and your positioning is really hard. Like, yes, you're invulnerable to, like, all damage, but if your AD carry dies or whatever, you're gonna die too. So it's like she kind of has protection, but only if your team's kind of smart. Like, in a team fight, you can jump around to different people, but basically, if you're losing, like, if your AD carry just keeps dying, or you just keep losing team fights, then you become a big part of the problem, because you're just gonna die every time. Like, if you're on somebody and they die, you die. So it's really hard for her to, like, try to save people that are doing dumb things, which happens a lot in solo queue, versus someone like Janna or Rakan or some of these people can try to make a play to save people and they can still get out. Hey, thanks so much for the sub. I appreciate it, Daniel. So she's just a bit riskier, but if you have a smart team that knows what they're doing, especially a team with a lot of mobility, then she can be really good. She is good with things like Eve, who's very popular right now, or other invisible things like Twitch, because she gets invisible also. She gets invisibility also when she goes on those champions and they're invisible. So I think she's really fun. I personally like playing her. I think she has a lot of potential. Obviously in pro, she's okay, although I think she's overhyped. Like, she's banned, you know, so much. I think she's literally one of the most banned champions, like second only to Akali in terms of bans, but she only has a 50% win rate. So she's okay, but she's been nerfed so much. I just think that it's difficult unless you have like a duo that you know you can trust. I think it's difficult. Lux is still pretty good. The numbers have hurt her a lot. I think she's pretty good into Rakan, but she is vulnerable. More people are going towards Comet to try to make up for some of the other nerfs early on to give her more pressure. So she can be really good, but if they flash her Q, you're gonna die. I don't know. She's okay. I think she can work, but it definitely feels like whenever I try to play her that it's just hard to do as much stuff. I don't know. I feel like against hard engage, you know, like Leona and Nautilus, she has a really, really hard time dealing with that. It's like, once again, yeah, you can hit your Q maybe, but they're still going to be able to get on you most of the time. So Morgana is a very good counter pick to a lot of these champions. Now you might say, well, why is Morgana not higher if like Rakan, Leona, and Nautilus are the top three? And that's a good question. I mean, maybe she should be tier 2 or tier 1 even. It's just, for me, she has a lot of long cooldowns. Her Q is really slow. It does have a large hitbox. Her W is basically not an ability. Her ult is extremely lackluster. It's okay. It does okay damage. But once, you know, you're very rarely going to get off the second part to it. Her itemization is really funky. She has very low attack range, so she can't really attack like the enemy in the laning phase too much. She's just really, really conditional. Yes, the Black Shield is very good, and yes, the Bind is very good. But for me, both of those are on really long cooldowns, and those are like her only two abilities. So it's just not reliable enough for me. But let me go over here real quick, actually. She's okay. I mean, she had a 56% win rate in pro. She's picked as a counter pick. So if you're a later pick and you want to pick Morgana into some of these picks, you know, give her a whirl. I think she can work. If you do hit your Qs a lot, and if you're on point with your Black Shields, I think she can be really good. But once again, she's kind of reliable like some of these other champs. It's hard for her to make a play by herself. You can if you hit, you know, you spam your Qs and hit them on people, but there's huge windows where they can punish you if these things are on cooldown. So she's all right. Soraka, pretty good if they never get any anti-healing, but Morellonomicon and Executioners are very popular right now. She's really unsafe. If you get camped, you're going to get murdered a lot. But if you have a lot of tanks on your team, if you have things like Volibear and Mundo that are going to get Spirit Visage, you know, which gives her 30% extra healing on them, she can be really good. So stay tuned. If we go back into a tank meta around Worlds or into the preseason, she'll definitely go up a lot. I think she has a lot of potential. She has really, really high scaling, rivaled by only someone like Sona, but the meta is just a bit too fast, and there are too many assassins for me to feel comfortable with her right now. But, you know, she's always got old asterisk by her. If the meta's right, if you have tanks, if the game slows down a little bit, she could be really strong. And then finally, Lulu can be really good. It's just, she's kind of risky. Like, she's okay against assassins. It's just, I think the big thing is she's really slow. She has really low base stats, and a lot of times you have to choose, do you want to polymorph the enemy or do you want to buff your ally? You can't do both. And so it's like, if you polymorph the enemy, she really doesn't have much scaling. You know, it's like, okay, you just CC'd that person, you have kind of a mediocre shield, and you've got your ult, and that's it in a fight. Or you can use your W on your AD carry and be like, wow, I just gave them a lot of movement speed, a lot of attack speed, you know, and that's great. But it's like, now I don't have any CC other than my R. So I think what they should do, honestly, is take the attack speed buff and put that on the E, or the movement speed, one of the two, put that on the E. I would like to see the attack speed, because if it's the movement speed, I think that would be too similar to Karma. But put the attack speed on the E, and that would be great, because then you're putting picks on your AD carry, you're giving them the attack speed buff, and then you still have your polymorph that you can put on somebody else. Maybe, I mean, you might even be able to say something like, well, that would be kind of similar to Janna, but if the shield gets broken, then they don't get the attack speed anymore. Something like that. I don't know. They just need to decouple some of the power off of her W and put it on something else. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank y'all very much for tuning in. Sorry, this is a bit of a longer one. I just want to go in depth. I know there was a lot of stuff that shuffled around this time since last time, and I wanted to talk about some stuff in depth other than just Rakan. I know we still had 20 minutes of Rakan, but I wanted to talk about some of these other picks as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Be sure to like and subscribe if you do enjoy it. Stay tuned for future tier lists. I will try to keep them under an hour. I'll see if I can do the 80 carry tier list tomorrow for you. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see y'all next time. Have a great day.